Welcome back to Empowered and Out. I am your host, Jonathan, and today's conversation is one you won't want to miss. Our guest is Tas Kronby. He, a versatile autistic professional, artist, and accessibility consultant whose work blends creativity, equity, and advocacy. With a degree in English literature, another in criminal justice, and a career deeply rooted in accessibility and the visual arts, Tas uses both their lived experiences and professional skills to reimagine how we build inclusive spaces. As a deaf, disabled, queer, trans, and biracial professional, Tas actively champions the rights and visibility of multiple communities, while also navigating the unique challenges that come with intersectional identities. From growing up in a Christian fundamentalist cult, to surviving abuse, to battling workplace discrimination, Tas has not only endured, but also built a voice that uplifts others. Today, we'll dive into their story, their struggles, the resilience, and the lessons they've learned that we can all take into our workplaces and our lives. So if you're a longtime listener or tuning in for the first time, I am so glad that you are here. And Tas, welcome to Empowered and Out. I am so glad that you are here.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
I'm excited for you to be here as well. So, audience listeners, I have to preface this. There is a trigger warning. I have heard this on many other podcasts before, just typically a true crime podcast. But today, and that is actually what's funny, Tas and I have a fun, like we actually previously talked about true crime and paranormal stuff. But we're not talking about any of that today. So, I just want to say before we dive in, I would just want to give just a clear trigger warning that in today's episode, we do discuss sensitive topics, including sexual, verbal, and physical abuse, religious trauma, and ableism. So if these are triggering for you, please take care of yourself as you listen. Pause if you need to, or skip this episode entirely, even though I hope you won't. But your well being always comes first. All right, so let's get started. So I mentioned it, and so let's dive into it. So let's start at the beginning because your story starts in a unique way, in a heavy place. You grew up in a Christian fundamentalist cult. Can you take us inside what that was like day to day? What rules or restrictions really defined your childhood?
Absolutely. So I was raised in a very isolating environment. The day to day, I'm going to actually look at my notes because I did the math. So it was 40 hours a week on average preaching. And that's because my mom homeschooled me. So I went everywhere my mom went. And on top of that, there was 3 meetings a week that you had to attend. And they were anywhere from like 2 hours to 4 hours, depending on the day. So usually my days started, and this is from the age of 3 years old.
Oh,
My
wow.
mother joined when I was 3. So this is really all I ever knew, which I also contribute that to why I don't sleep. So it was 6 a.m. I was probably already awake because my mother was doing like paper routes starting at 2 a.m. and I would sleep on top of the newspapers. Then we would go home and get dressed and ready to go out and preach. Sometimes wasn't even getting home till maybe midnight.
Oh, wow.
So from a very young age, I just learned you get like 2, 3 hours of sleep and that's what you do. And in that environment, I will preface this with my mother was extreme, even to the extreme in this work. My mother believed that being wealthy or having money of any kind was what they call worldly. That's the word they
Uh-huh.
use. It's called worldly. And you shouldn't want those things and you shouldn't have those things. So my mom made the choice for us to live in poverty because of that. So my mom was college educated, could have gotten a job that didn't have us in poverty, but she chose not to because that would not be, you're not close enough to God when you have money. That's how she said it. And there were some people even in the cult that would disagree with that. But that is how my life was. So I was homeschooled to really like embody that whole like no part of the world aspect of the belief system because you are taught you cannot be like people that aren't in this organization. You
Huh.
can't because that's wrong. They're wrong. You can be nice to people, but remember that they're a danger to you spiritually. That is how, and you know, it went past that. So not only was there the preaching 40 hours a week, which was because my mother was what's called a pioneer. Pioneering is where you full time preach and you're required to do 40 hours to stay as a pioneer. That's a
Wow.
requirement. So my mom would do cleaning jobs at night, do paper routes at night, do interior, exterior painting at night, all the while I'm going with her 24/7. And that was my life. And the piece of they take away, how do I put this? The brainwashing is intense. It's not just for children. A lot of times when people think of brainwashing, they think of it in the context of, okay, you're an adult, you have a formed opinion, and we're trying to convince you, like, not to. But it really goes beyond that because they do as much as they can to scare you and intimidate you. I was taught how to withstand torture by the age of 5, how to recite my social security number and not answer questions.
Wow.
And they would reference this in one of the big points that they put is the Holocaust. They educate you really quickly on the Holocaust because they use that as the example of how not to turn people in once persecution starts.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Okay. Huh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
So you're taught how to withstand torture. You're taught how my mom used to do drills. So I think I remember my first drill when I was around 6. My mom would put me in my closet, shut the door, and then she would stand in the front of the living room. It was a very small space, so it wasn't that far of a distance. And she would scream like she's being tortured. And my job is not to come out.
Wow. Ooh, that can really like mess with you like mentally, I'm sure. Cuz someone screaming, I kind of feel like you hear someone screaming, like we see someone like today, we want to go and see what's wrong and see, maybe help them, and it to be trained to tune it out and obviously not. Wow. At some point, you made the decision to leave that world behind, which couldn't have been easy. But what was the turning point for you when you knew you had to get out?
It was a lot of things piled on top of itself. So, when I was 4 years old, that was my first sexual assault at the hands of people in the congregation. And then later on, the next one was when I was 8. There was another one when I was 13. And then finally around 14 years old when I was groomed by a 45-year-old man to be his next wife. That is when I really started questioning more than just the theology. I always didn't quite understand the hypocrisy built into itself. Like, I was not allowed to watch television. I had like certain programs I was allowed to watch. Ironically, Star Trek was one of those, which is very ironic considering I wasn't allowed to watch like Power Rangers or Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Too violent and it's magic and that's evil, right? And so I always question, I'm like, but I can read this scripture that's really violent. Why can't I watch Power Rangers? But I couldn't ever get the answer. So I always questioned when I was younger, which was not welcomed, by the way.
Yeah, probably not. Yeah, no.
No, I had very many of discussions with elders that they'll literally put you in a room with these old men and they'll tell you like, this isn't okay. You can't be questioning this. You can't be saying this. Right. And I always was I always wanted knowledge and I always researched. I love the library. So even though sometimes I would like sneak books into my library bundle, like the history of vampires and things like that, like not fiction, but nonfiction, because I just wanted
Mhm.
to know. And I started studying other religious beliefs, other religions. And the common denominator is what I couldn't find. I'm like, this doesn't make any, like, why is this way of life this way? And there's not like confirmation, like this is what it's supposed to be. I'm like, there's all these different religious beliefs in the world. All of them have their own versions of radicalism. But if you look at just the fundamental basis on specifically Abrahamic religions, there were some elements that were consistent, but not to the extreme severity that I was in. You know, like modesty is a big one, right? I couldn't wear skirts higher than my ankle. There's nothing that says above the ankle is like this horrible thing, but it's in just learning like, okay, I was nowhere allowed to wear tank tops. You can't be tempting people. That was the whole thing. It's like, I was born female. They're like, you're a girl and you don't want to tempt the brothers in the congregation. So you got to make sure you're covered. Like that type of, and it just didn't make sense. And I remember a really specific conversation I had with my mom when I was about 14 after the grooming situation had resolved with me not, of course, marrying that person. Was I had just learned about what transgender was. I had just learned the word, had just learned what it was. And my thing was, I'm like, oh, okay. So trans women are women, trans men are men. Okay, cool. And then I asked my mom, I'm like, so how would they join the congregation? And my mom was like, why would they join the congregation? Like what
Mm,
they're doing is wrong. Like being gay is not okay. It's like that whole abomination thing, complete like
yeah.
that's expected, honestly, of cult beliefs. And I asked the elders, I was just like, okay, so like if someone's trans and they start coming to the congregation and they want to get baptized, can they? And the answer I got was only if they transition back to what, like how they were born. And I was like,
Mhm.
but what if they can't? Like, what if they've done a complete transition? What if they can't do that? And then they were like, well, they couldn't answer me. And that was the thing. They had no answer other than just spewing like the hatefulness behind things. They couldn't actually give me a concrete answer. And so I was like, yeah, I was like, this doesn't add up. None of this makes any sense whatsoever. This is not right. You can't claim that you love and value people and then be completely exclusionary and teach people that this is wrong, you're disgusting, you
Mhm.
shouldn't exist. Like, you can't do that. Those two things don't go hand in hand. And one of the things I always remember getting in trouble for this, I total read the Bible over 5 times. And every time, because studying is a big part of it, they want you to study, but they don't want you to actually question things. So I would have notes. And I'd be like, okay, here's the scripture here that contradicts this. And I would have this whole thing. And they were like, you probably are being influenced by a demon right now. And I'm just like, what? And that's what's so funny. My mom was big on this. My mom had family heirlooms. $30,000 worth of family heirlooms
Wow.
in value. It was jewelry. An elder told her there was a demon attached to it. And that's why I was rebelling. So she threw it in the trash. 30,000 in the literal trash. She threw it in the trash.
Wow.
1,000 worth. Keep in mind, we're poor. Like, we don't always have food. We don't have, and 30,000 worth of jewelry. Tossed it right in the trash just because an elder told her that. My mom burned a couple of my stuffed animals growing up because she's like, oh, there's definitely a demon attached to this because you're having nightmares. So we must have a demon. It's like, it's like, oh, it's not the trauma, but it's, oh, yeah, there's totally a demon attached to this. That was how that went, right? So it didn't make sense. There's too much hypocrisy. And one of the turning points was, so I was homeschooled and I was like, can't I just take my GED? Like, why do I have to do all this work? It's too easy. Why do I, like, academically, except for math, still can't do math to this day. Hello, dyscalculia. But other of the genre of education I was good with. And my mom was like, well, I guess you could do that. Just drop out and do your GED. And I was like, yeah. And she's like, but I don't really like the idea of you dropping out. And I'm like, okay, well, why don't I go to community college? Because you only have to be 15. And my mom was like, okay. So she lets me drop out, enrolls me in community college. And that was my first time interacting with people that were not in the cult because I was very much isolated. Every single person I grew up with was in that organization. I never had other friends. I barely had friends in the organization because people,
Yeah.
bullies, I was bullied. I was picked on a lot. And the thing was, like, that was my, like, first experience of, like, wait a minute, this is what adults are like that aren't in I'm like, "This is weird." And oh, sorry, go ahead. I
Oh, no,
can go on and
no, no,
on.
no.
Did you have a
Hey, no, it's very interesting because I'm sure, yeah, you saw the way people were acting, the way that you, of course, had not been taught, or you were taught to act as probably, I'm sure, a specific way.
Yeah.
And the more you were questioning and reading the Bible, and I think the Bible is fascinating in itself. And I mean, I went to a religious university and we had to study the Bible. That was part of our curriculum. You could not graduate without taking courses. It was an Old Testament course and a New Testament course.
Mm,
And I think what I've learned more and more is, as I've gotten older, actually, is how much what was written in the Bible at the time the Bible was written was
mhm,
more applicable to the people of the time. It wasn't written really for us today. Some consider it, it's just stories and we can maybe learn from a story or not. But there's a lot of things that have come, of course, recently with how people feel about certain things. And it's like, okay, well, if you believe this and you say you're a Christian, well, then you can't do this, 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 because the Bible says you can't do that, but yet you're doing that. So you're actually going against the Bible and actually God. And it's just so oh my goodness, like it's for me, I was curious. So once you like were seeing the opportunity to get out, so did you get out with the seeing the community college and stuff, like how did you decide, like where were you going, how were you, because I'm assuming your mom probably stayed in the cold.
oh, to this day.
Oh wow, okay.
To this day, I don't even I've been no contact with my mother now 5 years now, almost 6. Best days of my life, being no contact with my mother. And yep, to this day, still die hard, deep, deep in it, very deep.
How
There's nothing you can say to change her mind.
Wow. I mean, it sounded like even when you were saying she was like a pioneer, that
Mhm.
clearly she was pretty in it for end
Yeah.
goal. Like there wasn't.
That that's like pioneers are like that's like top tier for a woman, because 'cause you're not allowed to do anything beyond that. That is like if you're a woman, that is your top level right there that you can hit. You go to special schooling that no one else gets, special books that you're not allowed to show other people. Like it's all very like exclusive in that sense. The only thing above that is if you actually got a role at their headquarters, which is in New York.
Okay.
It's a compound. I'm gonna call it a compound because that's what it is. They have their own lawyers, they have their own stores, they have their own it's a compound,
Wow.
period. That's just what it is. They'll tell you left, right, "No, that's not." I'm like, "No, that's what it is." And you're isolated, you're not allowed to leave. That's in New York. But if you're a woman, you can't get to that level unless you are connected with a man. If that makes sense. So, like,
Yeah.
the brothers go to one end, the sisters go to the other, but you need to have some sort of, like, I'm gonna use the word betrothed because that's what it you need to be, like, betrothed, and you have to be young. You can't be over the age of 25 and go there. So, my mom was already out because she was already older than 25 when she joined. Like, and the thing is, when you're mentioning the Bible and, like, the things it teaches, and this is the thing, when you're in a cult, it's all twisted. So, you're taught how, like with preaching, you are taught how to make sure that person does not shut the door on you. You're taught, I call it's complete salesman. You're taught how to get the in, how to go over this roadblock. Here's this scripture. If someone says this to you, show them this. If they say this to you, show them this. You're taught how to keep people talking and persuade them
Mm.
into listening to you,
Which is
right?
very salesy, like really.
Oh, 100%, and very much, targeted because you have to count your hours. Like, your hours are calculated no matter what, if you're a pioneer or not. You have to submit your hours every week to the congregation elders. You have to document how many magazines you hand out, how many Bible scriptures you read, how many Bibles did you give out. Like, you have to have all of that counted
Wow.
and given. The thing about it is, and this is what, and I mean, I usually don't, it's so funny. It's been hard for me to say like the name of what I was raised in because there is like a layer of fear there still. But
Yeah.
for the context of this, because this I think will help people. Jehovah's Witnesses. That
Okay.
is this cult, right? Here's the thing that people don't realize. We are taught how to keep you feeling bad if you shut the door on our face. You're taught to prey on the politeness and the social expectations of people. That's why they send children to your door.
Mm.
They would put me with another child. I'm like 8 years old. And oh God, how old was he? He would have been 5. And they would send us together to a door that they know the people usually don't want to talk to us. Because, oh, they're not going to close the door on children. They're not going to close the door on children. And so when they come to your door, if you engage with them because you don't want to be rude, they're like, they won't stop coming to your door. They won't stop, period. They're not going because they're taught not to. They wear you down and you're taught like, okay, even if the person's hesitant, but they let you come back, there you go. You go back once a week. You go back every 2 weeks. You're taught to continually go. This is where I live now. They came to my door 3 times. It took 3 times of me telling them, get off my property, for them to stop coming because here's the kicker. If you allow them to come on your property and you do not tell them to like never come again, they will come back. Even if you're not interested that day, they'll come back the next month. You have to actually tell them to not come on your property because then there's a legal issue for them. If you tell them you are
Oh.
not welcome on my property, they can't come back except here's the other, they'll come back every 3 years. If you own the home, they'll check on that. If you give them the name, like your name, they will check to see if you actually own the home or if you're renting. They'll look at property records, see if it matches. If you're renting, they come back once a year. But the thing is, if you tell them, you can call the police on them. They don't want that. They don't want you to call the police because that's issues for them. So you have to be rude. Be rude. Tell them they are not welcome. Tell them you do not come on, you do not step foot on my property again, or I'm calling the police on you, period. And it was funny because it had been a year, because I rent, it had been a year since they came. And they put you on a do not call list. And then the next person to your door will be an elder because only elders take the risk of going onto people's properties that have told you not to come back.
Hmm. Okay. But
Yeah.
interesting. So once you did leave,
Mhm.
how did you even begin rebuilding your sense of self after leaving something that had been so controlling?
And that's the thing, I didn't have a sense of self yet. Individuality is not acceptable. It's about conforming to the expectations they have for you. And I went to college and that was my first experience with like queer people. And I was like, oh my God, I totally yeah. I'm like, oh my God, I totally relate to this, and this. And keep in mind, this wasn't necessarily a good thing because I was 15 and she was 24. So,
Oh,
and that's the other thing. Growing up the way I did, that's not even a red flag for me at that time. Like, 24-year-old is flirting with me. Like, that's not a red flag because I had 45-year-old. Like, to me, that's normal. So I will say total predator. But I was like, okay, I kind of like her. And I'm like, I kind of like her. She's kind of cute. And I was like, uh-oh. And then I left when I was 17. So I left when I was 17 by leaving home. And then I didn't completely disconnect from the cult itself and some parts of the belief system just because how deeply ingrained they were until I was 24. I was 24 when I like was completely 100% out. So it's been a little over 10 years then, because I'm 36 now. So a little over 10 years. And I didn't have a sense of self and I had to build it. I'd say that until around 30 is when I finally felt like I had my own of like who I am. This is what I believe. This is how I feel without any other noise. Because it's hard to untrain your brain.
for sure. Yeah. Do you feel like some of the work that you do now in accessibility and art and advocacy is in a way a response to what you experienced growing up?
Yeah, it is. I think your voice is never heard, and they do what they can to silence you as much as possible. And I think that with advocacy, I am in a position where I can speak up on something, and not everyone can do that for
Mhm.
various reasons. And so for me, I think that's a lot of the advocacy is, yeah, I know what it's like to not be heard and be oppressed in a very unique way. And I think that has fueled a lot of my passion for it. And also, I'm really stubborn, which fits great with advocacy work because you can't change my mind if I'm right. And let me rephrase that. I love facts. Like, if you can prove me wrong, well, please do prove me wrong, but give me receipts though. Like,
Yeah.
I need receipts. I'm not just going to agree with you. But if I'm wrong, I'll say, okay, yeah, I was wrong. But I think that the demand for actual, you can't just change my mind because you say so. Because that's what I grew up with. We tell you how to feel. You don't get to choose how you feel. And I think that definitely creates a advantage with advocacy because you can't I think of something I've been hearing lately. Someone said this to me recently. They're like, you have to meet people where they're at. And I'm like, no, you don't, because that's why we're still where we're at. Like, you can't just meet people where they are because that doesn't make change happen. Specifically with accessibility,
Hmm.
it's like, no, because if you just meet someone where they're at, they're not taking accountability for the fact that they're not doing what they should be as a human. I don't, so those things I think help me with advocacy in general.
All right. So let's talk about autism and late diagnosis. So you've also shared that your mom, like refused to accept that you're autistic when you were
Mhm.
younger. And it wasn't until 24 when you finally got an official diagnosis. What was it
Mhm.
like to finally have that clarity later in life?
So I found my old medical records, and that's how I saw like my mom was doctor hopping. They would bring up autism, and she instantly changed doctors. Instantly, just like I found about 15 doctors in my record from the age of 3 until I was 10.
Wow.
And
That's a lot of doctors.
oh, yeah. My mom and I found tons of unfilled prescriptions. My mom was really big on, like, don't pollute your body with medication. So, it's like, "Oh, you're sick? Here, take some echinacea." Like, I didn't even know what cold medicine was until I got actually out of the cold. I was like, "Wait, I can take something to not feel miserable right now? What?" And so, it was I realized I just forgot the question. It was autism, right? Okay. And so it was more validating because I have never been high masking as an autistic person. And I didn't know that I wasn't high masking. And I'm like, oh, that's why people are constantly telling me not to act a certain way or don't do this or don't do this. When I went in for my assessment with the neurologist, the assessment they told me would take between 4 to 6 hours. And she stopped it at 2 hours. And she's like, oh no, you're like so autistic. I saw as soon as you were like sitting in the waiting room. You're autistic. I don't need to do the rest of these. And I'm like, okay, cool. So that was easy. And it's because I've never been high masking. I just didn't realize that I always thought I was just being bullied. I never realized it was because I wasn't a high masking autistic person. And my mom just never wanted any diagnosis, though she didn't want the label. I roll my eyes at
Hmm.
that because it's just ridiculous to me now. Just like I don't want to get you help because the label. And it's like when in reality, a lot of the supports I got after I got my diagnosis when I was 24, if I would have had those as a kid, even let's say out of the cult, because the cult created its own issue. So if I wasn't raised in a cult and I would have had those supports as an autistic kid, life would have been so much better for me.
Interesting. So looking back now, do you see signs from your childhood that make you think, oh, okay, well, that makes sense do with like the autism?
I hyperfixation city. Oh my god. I was obsessed with Shakespeare. Like obsessed. I read Romeo and Juliet. Ironic. Can't watch Power Rangers. I get to read Romeo and Juliet when I'm 8. Whatever. When I'm 8, I got to read Romeo and Juliet. And then I was hooked from then on. I read every single Shakespeare play. Although my favorite is always Twelfth Night for the obvious queer of that play. That is always going to be my number one in my heart. I read that when I was 9 and I always had hyperfixations. Socially, I was blunt. So, like, someone does something, I just call it out. I remember there was this one time out preaching with this, and this sister was in the back seat with me, and she called me ugly. I was 6. She called me ugly. And so I took my notebook and I smacked her in the face with the notebook. And my mom came back into her just screaming at me because I smacked her. This little 6-year-old just like bitch slapped her with a notebook. And my mom's like, "What happened?" I'm like, "She called me ugly." She said that I'm ugly. And my mom was just like, "Well, you can't smack people in the face with notebooks." And I'm like, "But she called me ugly. What am I supposed to do?" It made me mad. She called me ugly. And it was just like this need for fairness. I always had, and I think not every autistic person is like that. For me, though, with my autism, I was always like, but that's not right or that's not fair. And the kids my age just loathed my existence. They were just like, my mom would babysit them and they want to play with something of mine, which was not very many things. And I'd be like, "No, you can't touch my stuff. You're such a brat." Like, the parents would get mad because I wouldn't share, like things like that. And no matter what my mom tried to do, I just wouldn't. I'm like, "No, I'm not sharing." Because this is mine and I don't want them to touch it. And so just the hyperfixation, I was really big. I wrote my first chapter book when I was 5.
Wow.
It was called The Homestead Mystery because I loved Nancy Drew. That I continued writing my whole, like, writing was a big part of it. I wrote poetry all the time. And the funny thing about that is my mom just couldn't understand how I wrote such like dark poetry.
Really?
And I'm like, yeah, that's what I said as an adult. I'm like, really? You couldn't figure that out? Really, mother?
Or she didn't wanna believe it, like,
Yeah.
while you were writing it.
She really didn't. I confronted her in 2020 because I said, I'm like, if you wouldn't have done these situations, like, for example, when I was 4, when I was assaulted, my mom was in the upstairs room. My mom was in the upstairs room. I ran up the basement steps naked. She sent me back down.
Wow.
And I'm like, "Yeah, mom, that's kinda your fault because I was 4." And her comeback was, "Well, I don't know, maybe you lied." So just that's my mother in a nutshell. Denial because of my mom needs people to tell her what to think, which is why the cult is so deeply embedded in her.
I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's just how she is, and I think that I literally spaced out on that question again. I lost it. It just left the building.
You pretty much answered it because you said I said with the autism, did you see signs from childhood that make you
Oh,
think that
yeah.
that makes sense now? And yeah, you answered it. You kept going. And so yeah, no, you're totally fine.
Those segues, that's another thing. That's how another way I'm very autistic. I'm like, "Here we go." I'm also ADHD, so I'm just like, "Here's a side train, let's go this way."
Well, some people listening to this podcast, or I guess even watching us, will understand that I tend to go on tangents all the time instead of my guests. So I feel that it should be called Empowered and Out, the Tangent Podcast, because we go off on tangents all the time. But I think for me, that's a real conversation because you think,
Mhm,
"Oh, what about this? Oh yeah, I was thinking about this." So you actually started, and you mentioned starting in
mhm.
college at 15, which is amazing,
Yeah.
truthfully. I mean, but you also faced a lot of discrimination and ableism there. What
Yeah.
stands out most from that time, and how did it shape the way you see inclusion today?
So my dad is black and my mom's white. I actually took a DNA test, not to quote Lizzo. Turns out I'm that bitch. Anyway, sorry. um, and I'm literally almost 50-50, half and half, like straight down the middle, which I thought was cool. And the part in college, one of the traumatic experiences in college was dealing with neo-Nazis.
Mm.
So they were very much active at the campus that I was at the time, and one of them was in one of my classes. So, and I remember that he made me uncomfortable. Like, there's just something, his presence made me uncomfortable, but I didn't know why until this happened. And they sat him next to me in the classroom. The professor just kind of put people in pairs, and so he happened to be the one that got put next to me. And he just like leaned over and was like, "I'm gonna kill you, you halfie."
Wow.
And I was just like, "What?" And he actually had a pocket knife that then when class ended and I was leaving, he, like, took it out and was, like, flipping it in his hand, like it was like one of those pocket knives you put on a keychain, and he was just, like, flipping it around, but it was out. And I remember telling my mom about it, but she didn't believe me. She's like, "Someone wouldn't do that." I was like, "Okay. Okay, mother." So then the next day at class, and he sat next to me again, and he just was, like, whispering slurs at me the entire class. And so then I went to the professor, and it had turned out he had threatened other students, so I wasn't the first one. And so they ended up removing him from the class, not the campus, but from the class. And it made going there like, just terrifying. It was scary, always looking over my shoulder, always looking over my shoulder. And the way that colleges, when I was 15, deal with that stuff is they're just quiet about it. Like, the dean was like, "So sorry that happened. We took care of it, so you don't need to do anything else with it." And, of course, because I was a minor, my mom didn't pursue anything. They were really active on the campus. They had, like, I don't know what they call them. I forget what they call them. You know, like, the groups in colleges? Like, you have, like, different, like, group programs where it's like people in tech. So they have like this computer building like
Mm,
group
mhm. Yeah,
that's like sponsored by the students.
yeah,
They had a group there for the neo Nazis had a whole group.
wonderful.
And so that wasn't my first experience with racism, far from my first, but the most physically dangerous.
I mean, it's interesting that the universe they said, "Oh, we took care of it," but they really didn't because all they did was take him out of a class. They didn't take him off the property.
Mhm,
So, who was to say that he wasn't gonna do something again or someone in that neo-Nazi group that was could have potentially done
mhm.
something. So,
Yeah,
g
they just switched the classes around, and I still saw him on campus, and I always was really scared when I would see him outside and things, and I would, like, run as fast as I could into the building just to be where there's other people.
I mean, I don't blame you. I would have done potentially the same thing. It would have I think hair would have stood up on the back of my neck every single time I would see him because it'd be like, okay, he showed a knife to me and told me he was going to kill me. And now I'm seeing him on campus. And who's going to protect me because I'm not in a
Mhm.
classroom? I'm now out on the campus and it's less protection if you're out in the open. So,
Oh, yeah,
wow.
100%.
So, when you look at workplaces now, do you
Mhm.
see the same kinds of ableism that you faced back then just showing up in different ways?
Oh, 100%. So the ableism really hit when I went to college the second time. That is when I had professors that, like, refused to do my accommodation. I had to put formal grievances in on professors. It's they can't say no to an approved accommodation, like, those things. I had people at disability services say, "If you can't keep up, maybe you shouldn't be in college," at disability services. And so that is very much in the workplace the same way. It's very much bleeds over. Educational institutions are some of the most inaccessible places if you have disabilities, and I'd say workplaces take second to that. Sometimes first, depending on the situation, but
Mhm,
I'd say those are like your top 2. Yeah, workplaces, I've had oh gosh, one particular place I worked, it was a place that served people in my community, in the disabled community,
mhm,
and it was one of the most ableist places that you could imagine well, when you're a nonprofit and you service people with disabilities, usually you have to have a percentage of your staff that are disabled. Like it's a requirement to keep your funding. So I was one of their diversity hires because I was a person of color and I was autistic, and I also had some physical disabilities. So I a million percent got that job because they needed to hit their quota, and it showed in their processes. And I remember one interaction with my supervisor where I was in charge of some of the event coordinating. So they were looking for some new event options, right? And I was like, okay, perfect. Like we could do an event for the autistic community here because there's never anything for adults, everything's for kids. Let's like do an event. And my supervisor looked at me and was like, no, I don't want to deal with like that autism stuff. I don't wanna deal with developmental disabilities. That's just, like, too much. To my face,
Wow.
"Okay, thank you for me learning how you actually see me. Awesome."
Yeah. Wow. My goodness. Okay, so let's talk about coming out as trans. So we're going to
Okay.
fast forward a little bit. So you came out as trans, but after being
Mhm.
married, and that's such
Yeah.
a big step and a deeply personal one, obviously. What was that
Mhm.
journey like for you, both in the terms of your own identity, but also how people around you reacted?
Oh, wow. So that was terrifying. It was absolutely terrifying. You know you know, I always like, with my spouse, I always knew that he was a very, like, open-minded person, and he was very much like an ally, and he was very I knew these things, but you still never actually know how someone's gonna react
Yeah,
to
until
it.
you say it. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, and we had been married at that point, we'd been married 2 years, and I remember just, like, being absolutely terrified. I was like, "I need to talk to you and tell you something," and, like, instantly, like, the color just drains from his face, and he's just like, "What happened? What's wrong?" And I'm like, "No, just, like, let me get this out, because if I don't say this now, I'm going to just, like, end up crying, so just, like, let me get it out first." And his reaction to it was, "Okay." And I was like, "Wait, what?" And he's like, "Okay." He's like, "I accept you for who you are, and if that's who you are, then I accept you. So just chill about it. Just chill. Just like not like, yeah, okay." And I was like, "What the?" And I'm like, "Okay." Do you have questions? Are you like, nervous about anything, and, like, we just had a whole conversation on, like, okay, so, like, what are you how far do you wanna transition? What steps do you wanna do in your transition? How can I support you with the transition? And just it was just a really positive experience coming out to him, and I couldn't have asked for anything more with that. We'll be going on 8 years in January now,
Oh,
and
nice.
it was just absolutely just mind-boggling how accepting, because 'cause I'm not used to people like that are just accept you. And so with him, though, I found that, and that was amazing. But it went a little differently with other people. So I had a couple people that were not close friends, just more just colleagues, acquaintances, and a couple of them just were like, "No, I'm okay. I'm never talking to you again." And one in particular, probably that bothered me the most was a member of like she her and her wife were like really nice people, and I had started to build a friendship, and then as soon as I came out, was just like, "Nope, we're Christian, we're not talking to you again, that's disgusting." And I was just like,
Okay, but hold up. You said her and her wife?
"Yes!"
Okay, so they're lesbians, and yet then they have a problem with you coming out as trans.
Yes.
What?
They said because it goes against God. That's what their reasoning was on it.
So does their relationship. So
I mean, exactly, like, it was and that one
well,
surprised me the most.
yeah, I mean,
And, it depending on when you look at Christianity and just Abrahamic religions as a whole, that is where that is,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
like, with theology. It's not right, but that's just what the basis of things are.
right.
And so but that one surprised me. That one actually surprised me because I'm like, "But you go to Pride every year and you advocate for, like, queer youth locally and you do all these things, but, oh, okay, I'm trans. That's too much for you. Okay, got it. That's your line of acceptance." And
Wow.
I had one person that wasn't in the not in the queer community at all, but was like, "You should talk to my pastor. They have a nice program that can help you." And I was like, "No, thank you. I know what you're talking about, and I'm not interested in that." I grew up in a cult, not planning on doing another one. And it just so that it was very isolating in that sense of like external community. My spouse, very accepting, so supportive, but everyone else disappeared, just gone.
I mean, I'll say this, and I've said this numerous times with many guests. If you have your support system at home, that's where
Mhm.
it matters the most because that's
Yeah.
where you need the most support. Because if you're having a challenging day, be it at work or wherever out in public, it's going to be nice to be able to come home and be able to have that conversation. That if something was bothering you, or you came in very upset, or something like that, they can go, okay, okay, what's going on? What's wrong? What happened? So I think it's unfortunate that especially someone who's technically a part of the community
Mhm.
would like negate you as, oh no, because the Bible said, but yeah, wow. Okay. So how did that experience shift the way that you show up in your daily life, whether it's at work, relationships, or just owning your truth?
You know, it's scary outside of my house. I've always struggled with agoraphobia. It's definitely gotten worse in the last like 5 years or so because people are just they're just, a lot of them are just dangerous people in the sense of like, for example, I live on a block and then 3 blocks away, there are people that I know from the cult.
Oh, wow.
And we're probably like maybe 10 minutes, if that, away from one of the congregations I was in when I grew up. Because and it just happened to be the placement of where we live, which we're in a really quiet neighborhood, which is why we picked this. But like that's still like that I'm surrounded. It feels like I'm always surrounded by that type of people. Got a couple of racist neighbors, so that's fun. Not literally fun.
Yeah.
It's not fun at all. That actually don't won't talk to me at all. No acknowledgement. Like they could be looking right at me and I could wave nothing. And when we first moved in, they saw my husband first. Hey, welcome in like to the neighborhood. Then as soon as they saw me, nothing. They won't talk to him. They won't talk to me. I've had people that have come over to visit me that are white and they will talk to them in front of me. Like, it's like that. Just it's everywhere, and it's scary. It's very hard for me to leave the house. With my mental health, I'm always terrified. And also some of that too, prior to my relationship with my husband, I had been in abusive relationships, one where I almost died, and that person stalked me for a time. And it's so then there's always that. I'm always terrified I'm gonna see someone. I'm gonna see that person. They're gonna come kill me because that's what they threatened to do. That's their whole goal. And all I can hope is it's been long enough that they just, moved on with their terrible little life and they wouldn't care if they saw me in public. But I don't actually believe that though. It makes it terrifying. And just to be like, I have like a lot of pride gear. I have like trans flags and like I have a lot of different, and I'm afraid to wear it outside because just like a few blocks away, someone got their pride flag burned. Like it's scary to show up as who I am. And I fight with that a lot because it's very easy to want to hide. Not change who I am or say I'm something I'm not, but like just to not, like no more pride gear, like just be really quiet, just kind of. And I'm like, no, because I spent my entire childhood being hidden and forced into this box. And I couldn't even be who I am now. And I can't go back in the closet, so to say, just because I'm terrified.
Mhm.
And so, but every day it's hard. Every day I'm checking the news to make sure there hasn't been any type of attacks close. I mean, last month someone got beat with a baseball bat at the bus station because by someone that was a white supremacist. Like it's terrifying, but I also know that I can't just hide
Right.
because that doesn't do anything. And I'm like, I'm 36. That's not that old, but I'm like, I didn't really start life though until I left the cult. And building who I am now, I'd say at like 30 years old, I'm like, okay, I've been living the life I want for like 6 years of my existence. And I'm not going to waste it trying to hide it again. I can't. But it's terrifying. I can't pretend it's not because it is.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It would have to, I can only imagine how you feel. And I would probably feel the same way. But you're right. Hiding defeats the purpose of you to where you are today. Like you
Mhm.
went through enough that you know who you are, you know what you've experienced, and it's upsetting that you can't even put like the trans flag outside or, what you might want to do just because I always just am in awe of how people get so worked up about
Mhm.
our differences. And we were created literally by God to be different. So it doesn't make sense. I mean, you saw this coming from obviously a very different perspective being in the cult because they wanted you pretty much all to be the same. And
Mhm.
so, but it's interesting because that's not how we were created. We might have been created as it said, in the image of God, but in reality, we're all unique and different because of God. So why people don't like the differences, it always just bothers me because, and I've been like that my entire life. I had people when I was friends with people who, just to put it blunt, who weren't white. I had certain people like, should you really be friends with him? Why? Why does that matter? Like, I
Mhm.
remember even in college, it's kind of funny to look at it now because hearing more and more horror stories about fraternities, but I had looked at possibly getting into a fraternity. Well, I had a friend of mine at the time who happened to be Black. And it got back literally to my father, and it was said that, well, John needs to stop hanging out with that person here. He's not going to get into the fraternity. And I told my dad, I said, here's the deal. I don't want to be a part of that. If that's how they act and that's what they're looking at, are you sure I'm at a Christian university? Because that's pretty judgmental and just looking at me in a different light just because I've decided to open my group of friends to everyone and anyone. I was like, so I told him, I said, I'm sorry. I know I'm technically a legacy and I could get in this fraternity, but nope, I don't want in if they're going to be like that.
And I think that one of the things I'm not Christian, and so I'm not speaking on like how people exist, like not in just like outside of the Christian teaching of it. I think at the end of the day, it also doesn't even matter like how humanity and why that humanity exists. It's like we're humans, we have feelings, we have the ability to cognitively process information, and you know right from wrong, and you know how you want people to treat you, but then you turn around and you don't give that same back. And but to you, it's justified for whatever, like list your reasons. Everyone always has a reason to justify why they're going to be hateful towards one group or the other. And it's like, but that doesn't actually matter. That shouldn't matter to you. And I think not enough people ask, why does that matter to me? Why is that such a big deal? Why can't I be inclusive? Why do I feel the need to completely segregate myself from an entire group of people just because someone told me I should? But people don't think that way. And it's so people have more sympathy for animals than people. They have more emotional. I saw a post on social media where someone was talking about how sad it is, how many homeless animals there are because of people losing their jobs. And I'm like, what about the people losing their jobs? What about the people? I love animals, but it's not the same as a human, and you really should care about the human more. You just should, but it's
Yeah.
not how it goes, and it forever baffles me. And one of the things, as someone that's biracial, that I've experienced throughout my life, I get it. I get discrimination from both sides. I'm light skinned. I'm not dark enough to hang with the Black crew. I'm not white enough because I don't act white enough to hang with the white crew. And so I get it from both sides. I remember doing it during Black Lives Matter. I had tried to interact with a local group, and the response I got was, "You're not full Black, so your life doesn't matter."
Oh my.
Straight to my face.
Wow.
"So you're not welcome here. Get out." And I was like, okay, got it. Can't fit there or engage there at all because I'm not welcome for that's colorism, technically. And I'm like, okay, got it. And it's a very unique experience when you grow up with two completely opposite cultures that have in that it forever baffles me. I mean, just my spouse alone for being with someone like me is an automatic target for hate groups just because he married me. He's originally from Denmark, and there's a lot of racism in Denmark. There's a
Mhm.
lot of racism it's rough in Denmark. I was so glad that I never went there because he warned me. He's like, "Your skin is too dark for Denmark and you will struggle. You will
Mm.
struggle because there's a lot of anti-Muslim there, so much. It's really bad there. And so I would look too Muslim for them. When I interacted with his parents over video chat, they were like, "Oh, you're darker than I thought you would be." Like, babe, you're a piece of crap. I don't, and they are actually, they're not good people, but like, it's just, no, it's a very strange middle ground to be in. I've never been accepted anywhere. And I'm at that point in life where I'm like, I don't even care. You don't have to accept me. I just have to accept myself. And as long as I accept myself, then whatever anyone else says, it's background noise. It's just static.
I agree. You made a good point. As long as you're accepting yourself, that's really what matters at the end of the day. So let's talk about work,
Okay.
workplaces, and identity. So, speaking of work, a big part of your story is how your lived experience shows up in the workplace. You've been open about dealing with everything from microaggressions to outright abuse. Can you share one of those experiences that really sticks with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So this experience includes almost every aspect of it in what happened. So I was an assistant. I was an executive assistant. And people that have been in those roles know you don't get treated the best in general in those roles in a lot of cases. Um, and I was in charge of an event. So I had every manager, every director of the company was there for this training. It was a training. And it was the quarterly strategic meeting that companies have to do. So there was around like 20 to 27 people in the room, something around there. And they were talking about dress code. And of course, that's probably a divisive topic in general in workplaces
Yeah.
because that's. And they were talking about whether people should be allowed to wear leggings. That's on because someone had a problem that people were wearing leggings because they said that it's too tight. It's not modest enough. So this discussion on leggings began. And hello, I'm wearing leggings that day, of course. And the person that was doing the meeting, the consultant that they brought in. And I want to preface this with part of my disabilities is I have a cognitive processing delay. So it takes me longer to get from point A to point B. So if things start happening really quickly, I have not caught up. I go on autopilot. And a lot of it too with my PTSD, I still have that like trauma reaction of survival mode where I'm dissociated from what's actually happening. And things can trigger that more easily than when the situation happened. And the consultant grabbed me from my little corner where I was taking notes. I didn't get a chair. There's no chairs for me. So I got to stand for a 4-hour meeting and take minutes. And grabs me from my little corner where I'm taking minutes, pulls me in front of this group of managers and directors, leadership, all leadership, turns me around, kind of lifts the back of my shirt a little bit and is like, okay, are these leggings? Is this like not going to work? Is this shirt too short? And so then my shirt drops back down and she like cups under my ass and she's like, okay, so here's where is this too short of a shirt to wear with leggings? Is this showing too much? And just happened so fast. And I didn't even have time to like process what was actually happening. So then they discuss my ass.
Oh my gosh.
And like they discuss like if I'm showing too much, is it too tight? Am I showing too much ass? Should my shirt be longer? And then she's like, thanks. And then just I walk back to where I was. It was like such a quick thing. And I felt so not okay after that. Like I could feel myself dissociating really bad. And I was like, okay, I am really not okay with this. So I finished the meeting and I go and I talk to my supervisor and I'm like, can I leave early? Because I'm not okay. And my supervisor's like, oh, what happened? So I explained, like, here's the situation and how it triggered a trauma response to me and how it wasn't okay for her to do that to anybody.
Right.
It was not okay to do that, period. And it's like, I didn't consent to be like, have my but as the display for how like you should dress at this job. There's charts in Google for that, right? Why did it have like don't pull me up there. And so my supervisor's like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that when it was happening. I'm sorry. Like just like what do you need?" And then was like, "Okay, do you feel like you need to report this to HR?" And I was like, "No, because it's a consultant. They can just talk to her and be like, 'Hey, don't do this ever again.'" I didn't think of it past that. Like, I'm like, "No, I don't need to talk to HR. I'm not putting in a complaint." Fast forward to the next day, I come to work. My supervisor comes out to my desk, like work. I just got there, and she's like, "You reported it to HR?" And I was like, "Reported what to HR?" And she's like, "What happened at the meeting? You reported it to HR?" I'm like, "No, I didn't report it to HR." And she's like, "Well, they got a report." And I'm like, "It wasn't me." And then I get a text message from a coworker that I had been in parentheses friends with because this situation proved otherwise. And she's like, "Oh my God, I heard what happened. I can't believe you were sexually assaulted at the meeting." And this is all at 8 a.m. I'm just like, what is going on?
Wow.
What is happening? So then I talk with that coworker and she's like, "Well, my manager said that this happened during the meeting." And I was like, okay. So fast forward a few hours, people are trying to figure out what happened because HR reports, are supposed to be anonymous, but it wasn't me who reported it. So they had to find out who reported it. One of the managers went to HR and said, "So this person was assaulted during the meeting, and because I'm going to misgender myself for the sake of the story, because she is autistic, she doesn't understand what happened. She doesn't understand how bad it was what happened because she's autistic." That's the report. That's the report. And I am just mind boggled at the situation. And the thing about it was, I'm like, you are a manager in this meeting. And there was only 2 men in this meeting. If that, there was 1 or 2. I can't even remember because it was primarily female leadership. Any one of you could have stood up and said, "Hey, don't do that. Hey, don't do that." No, 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 no. They're not going to do that at all. They're just going to report it after and then say that I'm incompetent.
Wow.
So that turned into a 6-month investigation.
Gosh.
A 6-month investigation. And during that time, man, I think this manager thought I would go along with it. I don't know why, but I feel like she did because when I didn't, it created a retaliation towards me. She had others, her staff started like harassing me, like making comments walking by my door, or they would have to have a meeting with my supervisor, and they would just like come up to my desk and be really loud because they know that triggers my sensory. So they would talk as loud as they could possibly. One of the staff in particular, and it because of what happened, this matters that he was black, and he would come. He liked to jump scare people. Keep in mind, this is a 35-year-old man at the time. He liked to jump scare people. And I had told him a long time ago, "Do not come up behind me and grab me," because he would do that to people. Don't do that. Period. And so, but it made him angry. Like this situation made him mad. So he started in the lunchroom coming up as close as he could to my back and just kind of breathing down my neck. And at one point, they had a company event, and at the time, I was vegetarian, and he refused to make the vegetarian food. He wouldn't cook it for me. He was the one on the grill, and he wouldn't cook it. So I was just like, "Whatever, I'll just get Panera then." And my supervisor, though, found out that he didn't and was like, "Hey, you have to cook this. You can't just not cook the food. It's a staff event." So then he comes up and he like leans over my desk way farther into my space. I'm like, "You need to back up." And he's like, "Well, I cooked your damn food." And I'm like, "Well, I don't want it because I already got lunch." And he's like, "That's so rude. I cooked it for you, didn't I?" And he like banged his hand on the desk. And I just said, "Get the fuck out." "No, you are not doing this." And I took the bus at the time, and he used to stay later, and he would kind of watch me in the parking lot as I left and make sure I saw him. It was very, very scary. And it was all retaliation because I did not endorse what this manager did, and they were all There was so much like work politics stuff happening that didn't even involve me. And I just ended up being collateral damage. And when I went to my supervisor, though, and I reported the things he was doing, she said, "But you're not dark enough and he's black. So if we do an HR report, it's just going to look like a, in quotes, white person accusing a black man of harassment." So she wouldn't, I was like, so you're telling me I can't put this report in? And she's like, "No, I'll deal with it." And she was like, "Okay." So in the 6 month long investigation, it was just this such a hostile workplace because everything started being divided. People were talking and whispering. And when I sat down with the investigator, it was like 3 to 4 hours long talking with this investigator. And I keep receipts, which is great because that is what ended up finishing the investigation when they finally interviewed me, because I had to interview every single person. They finally interviewed me and I had like the documentation, I had different things, and that wrapped it up. And lots of people got fired. I was not one of them, but I did quit right in February. I left right before lockdown. I left because I just couldn't handle being there anymore after that whole strenuous thing. I lasted about like 4 months after the investigation finished. And I just emotionally was wrecked. I was just wrecked. Couldn't eat. I dropped during that 6 month time, I dropped 50 pounds during that whole thing. It was so incredibly stressful, so terrible. And it was just like everything on top, ableism, just inappropriate workplace interactions, period. Unlike the race cards getting played, the politics, and it was just an absolutely horrendous experience. And I have never felt more isolated at a workplace than when that was happening. It was terrible.
For sure. Wow. So let's talk about living with multiple disabilities. So
Okay.
you've been open about living with the multiple disabilities, including DID. How do you personally view your disabilities, not through society's lens, but through your own?
This is such a hard question, and I've been racking my brain because I was like, I need to think about this one for a minute because I'm very used to explaining things, but I'm like, but am I actually explaining it through society's lens or through my own? And I think that for me, I do feel so let me separate this into sections actually. Physical disabilities, being neurodivergent, and then the mental health disabilities that I have. So physical disabilities. I have terrible body dysmorphia. Absolutely terrible. I don't have a realistic idea of how I look, and the limitations I have growing up, my mom was always pushing me. I have a joint condition, so like my ligaments are very loose. So my joints dislocate just randomly. I could just be walking, there goes my hip. And it's been that way since I was a kid. I was in braces, like arm braces and leg braces as a kid and things. But my mom was always like, push beyond your limit, push beyond your limit, because that's how you overcome the physical disability. You have to push beyond your limit. And so that had been my standard operating system with my physical disabilities for a long time. And only recently have I realized that that's really bad for you. And it's bad for me physically. It makes my disabilities worse, but I also don't need to do it. So the outside perception of my physical disabilities is I can't. Like I'm less than, I'm weaker. But my view of it is I do it differently than you, but I can do the same stuff and get the same results as you. And I don't need to kill myself physically and pop a hip out just to meet your standards. So I think for my physical disabilities, I'm working at setting my own standard for it and knowing my own limitations and not letting other people dictate to me what those are, but also acknowledging that sometimes I just can't, and that's okay. With being neurodivergent, I think I'm unique, and I embrace the term weird because I am weird and I'm totally okay with that. I think that I love my special interests. I love how I can sit there and research cannibalism for 12 hours and be happy, just like learning all this stuff. Like, I love that I can find information. I'm really good at finding information. I love to just learn. And I don't think if I wasn't autistic and ADHD, I don't think I would have that same drive to learn new things all the time. And think it's not, and now I will say this, it's not a superpower. People frame it that way a lot. Like, oh, you're autistic and ADHD, that's your superpower. And I'm like, no, that's ableist. Because I shouldn't have to have like my neurodivergence labeled as something otherworldly just so you're comfortable.
Mhm.
I'm just a person and I don't have your brain, thankfully. In a lot of cases, I'm like, I'm so glad I don't have your brain. And that's okay. So I think with my autistic identity, I accept that 100% for myself. I don't mask. I don't try to mask. I just am. And I've never been a high masker, but now I'm low masking. I don't care. You want me to make eye contact with you? Not my problem. That's your problem. I can hear you loud and clear. I don't need to look at you to hear what you're saying. I mean, now because I'm deaf, reading lips does help, but in general, with being autistic. And I think with now the mental health side of things, that's just, I'm very much, I would say I'm broken. I was shattered into a million pieces a long time ago. I've never known what it is like to not have trauma, to not have people that are abusing you in some form or fashion, to not have people like suppressing who you are for their own whatever reason, their own gain or their own just how they think it should be. And I think that I've had to learn that being broken doesn't make me less than, though. It's just the reality. When people have conversations like their childhood, they're like, oh my God, I remember when I like had my first Christmas with my parents and we did this and we did that. And I'm like, and they're like, what about you? And I'm like, never did holidays. Wasn't allowed. I have no idea. They're like, oh, do you have any fond childhood memories? And I'm like, no, actually, I don't. And they're just like, oh, you poor thing. And I'm like, no, don't pity me. Like, I'm not looking for pity.
Yeah.
I won't ever have the nostalgia that people have that didn't have the type of childhood I did. It's a very unique type of trauma. Religious trauma is very specific. And I think for me, when I look at people that I grew up with, I do sometimes like Google people to see where they're at. And 10 are dead already. And they were my age or younger when they died. Lots, and it's very common for people that grew up the way I did to self-harm, to commit suicide, to have substance abuse issues. It's just common. And so for me, I'm like, I'm was broken a long time ago, but all of those pieces still make a whole, you know? So that was then and this is now. And I think I'm just completely determined to not let that define how I see myself. And I don't. Those are the things that happened to me were not my fault and it was out of my control. And I think I've accepted that, but I still have to deal with the collateral damage.
Yeah, no, I mean, for sure. You're right. Like you didn't really, I would say, have control until you stepped away from that whole experience, in the cult because you weren't able to. You had to follow their rules, their day in and day out, what you had to do. Like you said, I mean, oh my goodness, starting with your mom on a paper route, going to all the way to like, I mean, whew, that wears me out just hearing it. And like that's a lot of work for like even an adult. I can't even imagine. I mean, granted, kids have this insane amount of energy, but it's just, oh my gosh, wow. Yeah. So let's talk about building your path forward. So
Mhm.
today you've woven all of these pieces together, your lived experience, your education, your art into accessibility consulting and design work. How did you make that shift into building this career and mission?
So I it's easier for me to work for myself than someone else because I can't conform. Like can do a great job, but there's a lot of social expectation that happens. So I knew a long time ago that like if I'm going to have sustainable work of any kind, I have to be doing it myself and be in charge of the different aspects so that I can make the job work around what I need for my disabilities and how I operate in the world. So that's how that really started was that. Like, okay, I've worked for these people, all these different people. It's not working out for me. Let me just do my own thing. And blending that though with the advocacy, because digital accessibility, I live online. Like even like me and my spouse met in a video game. Like I live online, right? And digital accessibility is a huge barrier for me personally, and I know it's that way for other people. So having the ability to, as an artist, look at things creatively, but also help people understand why accessibility matters and help them become accessible. Because there's a difference between compliance and accessibility. Compliance is the bare minimum requirement that like is set out by the law and different things. Accessibility means you're actually looking at every person and what type of barrier could they face that you can prevent if you just include it in how you design your platform. And that with the art kind of, I've always, it's, this is funny because I was a writer for so long. I did the indie author grind. I hated it every second. Visual arts is something. My mother was an artist. That was her degree, was in art. So came coming with that is the whole entire, oh, that's not good enough. Oh, you drew that. Nope, nope, gotta fix this. Just the criticisms. So I never really dove headfirst into my art. I did writing instead because it's creative adjacent to my mother. But then I realized like art is something that's always helps me feel happy. Feeling happy is hard for me. I don't even know if I truly completely understand what it is to have that feeling, but I have like the closest thing to it. And creating art does that. And so I'm like, this is perfect. I can do design and art and accessibility and help people make things like really awesome, but also inclusive so that everyone can use it. And I'm like, okay, so that's how that whole thing happened. That was like the birth of it.
That's awesome. And I'm right there with you. It's very hard to work for someone else. It's much easier to work for yourself.
Hmm.
So we've had a lot of interesting questions, and I thank you. I'm just going to thank you so much for that, just in general. But now we're going to have a little bit of fun. So these are what I call these my rapid fire questions. I ask all my guests rapid fire questions. And as you know, I did not send these to you. So you have no idea what I'm going to ask you. And my only ask is don't think about it too much. Try to come
Okay.
up with whatever comes to you first. And if we have to, because I might have said it to you, I know I had a previous guest where I think they took almost a minute to answer. So in post production, I had to cut that whole dead air out. So here's the funny thing is I'm not cutting out the video part of it. So if you happen to take a while to answer, people are going to see it. They're not going to hear
Mhm.
it because I will take it out audio wise. I think it's kind of more fun to see, I kind of find it more fun to see the visual of it, our response and our reactions. So, because you don't get that from audio,
Yeah.
obviously. So, okay. If you could replace every car horn with one sound, what would it be? Duck quacks, Beyonce riffs, or a polite British, excuse me?
Polite British, excuse me, 100%. Sorry, Beyonce. Gotta go with that one.
I love that. When I saw the question, I was like, okay, that's kind of awesome. And I don't know,
Mhm.
I'm torn a little bit between the duck quacks because it's a little bit obnoxious, but then I
Mhm.
love the British, excuse me, excuse me. I think that would be, I think that's actually kind of more fun to hear. So, okay, I like that. So, all right, next, you're in charge of designing a new holiday that must be celebrated worldwide. What's it called, and what's the most unhinged tradition that people have to follow?
Okay, so I'm gonna do this backwards. The most unhinged tradition that you have to follow is every single time you turn on a digital device, it must play a K-pop song.
Okay,
It
nice.
must. It must. Or K-pop adjacent. J-pop's fine. Anything in that like realm. And I think it would be called I think I'll have to go with the army created this. BTS armies, if you know what I'm talking about. It's like if you know, you know. It would be that. The army made this. And then for the rest, the whole world, boom, K-pop. And it would play in your language automatically. So whatever language, and if you do a signed language, you'd have a video that would pop up and it'd do the whole thing.
Okay, that's kind of awesome. I'm going to have to say that's pretty awesome. I like that. Okay, this one's kind of funny. I don't even know how I would answer this, so good luck. If cereal boxes could talk, which one do you think would have the most drama to spill?
My God, 1,000,000% Tony the Tiger.
Oh, you know
The
what?
the frosted cornflakes.
I think you're right. That you like,
Mhm.
the second you said Tony the Tiger, I was like, "Yeah,
Yeah, like, that box he's seen some things, okay?
yeah."
He has a lot to talk about.
Alright, and this is my final one. So you wake up tomorrow, and the world has decided that your autobiography. Oh my gosh, I can't even speak. We're gonna start that one over. Okay. You wake up tomorrow and the world has decided your autobiography is now a theme park ride. What's it called and what's the wildest part of the ride? I mean, you've had a heck of a life. So.
Oh my god. It's gonna be called Just Fuck It. Like, whatever, just fuck it. And the most wild part is going to be you're going to go down a roller coaster and you're going to enter a room. You're going to have sensory deprivation at first. No sound, no light. All of the chair you're sitting in is going to drop. You're just going to float like you're in space. And then randomly, all the lights are going to click on, and the most annoying voice that you can think of is going to start talking to you really loud, really fast. And then you're going to have this giant like hand just come up and grab you like a chair and hold you there, and you're going to have to sit there and listen to this annoying voice ramble for 30 minutes. And that is what it's like to be autistic and ADHD, overstimulated and stuck with a million things going on in your head, and you cannot leave.
Wow. That's good. That's good. One of these days, someone's going to flip this on me and I'm going to have to answer all the questions that I ask my guests. And I'm going to be so screwed because I've asked some really interesting questions over the life of my podcast so far. All right. Well, Taz, you've shown us how identity and lived experience can be turned into strength. What's one practical tip you'd leave with listeners about creating spaces at work or in life that actually honor who they are?
Put yourself first. You're taught inherently not to do that. And that's part of the problem. You can't do anything for anyone else until you help yourself first. So wherever you are, do what you need and don't feel shame about it.
I love that. And you know what's really interesting? So many people that I've been interviewing have been saying quite often recently, listen to yourself, follow yourself, do things for yourself because that's what matters the most. You got to do something for yourself because we can make the changes on ourselves. We can't make the changes on other people. We
Mhm.
can see their reactions potentially, but we have to focus on ourselves. I like that.
I keep a memento mori calendar where I mark every year to show how close I am to death, right? And it shows you start of your life to now and how much further you potentially have. And my thing I always tell people is, do you want to waste your life trying to please other people, make things happen for them, and you are not okay? Or do you want to spend your life making sure you're okay first so that change can happen outwardly with everyone else?
I like that. Well, Taz, thank you. Seriously, thank you for sharing your story with such honesty and courage. From growing up in a cult to navigating ableism to embracing your identity and building a career rooted in equity and accessibility, you've given us so much to reflect on.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.
So, listeners, or I guess technically viewers, because we now are on YouTube, I encourage you to check out Taz's work. You can find their art, design services, and accessibility consulting at taztheartist.com. And to connect with them on YouTube at The Real Taz the Artist. And don't forget, Taz is also the sorry, I just butchered that. It's called A Study in Darkness, a poetic memoir that dives even deeper into their story. All the links will be in the show notes for those listening. And please support their work because creating with all in mind benefits us all. So until next time, stay empowered, stay out, and remember the world gets brighter when we design with all in mind.